Marker.
Testing 1, 2, 3. We're on.
We're here to investigate a patient that killed 3 innocent teenagers on a Halloween in 1978. He was shot by his own psychiatrist and taken into custody that night, and has spent the last 40 years in captivity. Hello, Michael. I have something you might like to see.
Ooh, hello, fellow kind of critics. Happy almost Halloween, which is next week. And today we're actually going to be talking about that. Halloween, the movie 2018. Michael Myers is back in the sequel to the original 1978 film that ignores the 1981 sequel, any of the later franchise films, and even edits out several plot points that would be explored in those later films. Yeah, it's the good old alternate timeline movie that will be followed by the new sequel to the RoboCop movie, which will be ignoring any of the later sequels of the older RoboCop trilogy. Wow. An interesting exploration into the more meta-awareness of its slasher roots, the hype for Halloween is justified, but really over-exaggerated because of, yet again, marketing critics. The premise brings us 40 years after the Haddonfield murders, where a few British podcasters try to get more insight into Michael Myers, who is also being transferred from his mental asylum into a maximum security prison. Of course, this goes wrong, and he goes on a killing spree, yet again, only to later stumble into the one that got away, Laurie Strode, who is played for the 4th time by Jamie Lee Curtis, who has become one of those grandmas from Fury Road and has armed herself to the teeth in the event that Michael Myers does come back, while dealing with the trauma that impacted her own personal life with their daughter and granddaughter, who've all decided living in the same state with a man who is able to withstand gunshots and walk into any room almost undetected is the best health decision in anyone's life. Joking aside, the acting in this movie is what really gets people praise the film and really elevates the story into a more psychological one that I think is thanks to Jamie Lee Curtis's return, that has a bit more edge to it, less stable and more traumatic, and I think attributes to the best scenes when Myers isn't just killing people. It creates a more interesting perspective of the conflict and really goes into interesting territory. Judy Greer as Laurie's daughter also portrayed a serviceable role that I think builds on both their dynamics, as well as showing how trauma could impact loved ones, especially those who just want to live a normal life, which is shown in Andy Matchnick's character, who is Laurie's teenage granddaughter. This is creating a great trifecta that could have carried the whole movie, but that's where we get to see why this movie almost feels as hollow as a jack-o'-lantern. So all of that I just talked about in terms of performances are actually few and far between, because they have to remind people that Michael Myers is the looming threat that kills a lot of people, and the fact that this movie is called Halloween. Yes, the air of mystery on how Michael ticks is what makes him so compelling as an antagonist, but still feels less exciting the more everyone else keeps bringing it up, like 10 times. I think show is a lot better than tell, and watching them kill innocent people but not a baby or animal kind of gives me a little more insight to them rather than exposition. The pacing really does come to a grinding halt as we see similar scenes play out where Michael Myers defines the speed of most human beings, as well as the idea that conventional means only stop him for a few seconds. It feels like we are watching a slasher horror film, overpowering the more thriller and character dynamics that feel underutilized. And it does end up getting a bit silly at times. The silliest comes from Halleck Bilginer's character, who is even mocked as the other Loomis. Oh yes, another psychiatry character that is introduced into this story, and is Myers' psychologist, who really makes the premise and forces the plot to come to an unnatural conclusion that never felt as deserved as it should have been. In fact, his exposition-driven dialogue, an almost strange turn, really nearly soiled what the movie is trying to be, which is more than just a slasher/horror film, but only does so at the bare minimum and at the expense of the characters. Horror fans, rejoice, because this is the Halloween that is better than most of the crap we end up getting in October. And I think we'll be getting a great introduction into the original film, and I even like how there is plenty of homage moments to its more mixed history of sequels and remakes, including a nice guitar riff as Michael Myers rises from a wound that echoes a similar tone to the Rob Zombie remakes. I think the drama here is solid, but hardly feels as compelling as it is, and disjoints the film into two parts that feels like two different movies. It's a good sequel, not a great one, which is why it gets 5 out of 6 stars. Also, kudos to the composer, John Carpenter, coming back to make this soundtrack pretty killer, if I do so say myself.